Our goal is the prosecution of one of the most notorious drug traffickers in our hemisphere, Felipe Lobos.
From now on, I need you to distribute double the amount of crime. I need to be unreachable, invisible, so I can stay invincible. No comprende.
One day, you will find yourself standing right here.
Now, the highest bidder at that time was a man named Lobos. He took one look at me and he just knew I had a price. And he was right. You see, I sold him to the feds for my freedom, Tariq.
Now, what made Felipe Lobos the perfect villain in Power, and why would a Lobos prequel be the perfect addition to the Power franchise?
Take it to a place where they speak Spanish, where you see Lobos as a young kid, where you see where that fucking craziness came from.
Right.
You know, he's a wild animal, man. He's a wild animal that was abused. You know, you ever seen a dog in a yard that's got a chain and it's all cut up and it's fucking hungry?
Now, I don't always agree with every character getting a spin-off. For example, when you hear an Effie spin-off or another character of the same ilk saying, yeah, they want a spin-off of that particular character, the time's gone. They had the chance to make her character bigger than what she was, because she was such a mystery. Her connect back in Power, who was a mom, and who was a brother that was killed in a robbery gone wrong. But I think the more time that went by, the longer they dragged out not answering those questions, the more the audience actually lost interest, and by the time they introduced Effie's mom back in Power Book 2 Go Season 4, the reaction across my comment section and across social media was like, meh, who cares? However, a Felipe Lobos backstory, the rise of Felipe Lobos, a story which dives deeper into what made him evil, why he was the way he was, flashbacks, why he has the mannerisms he does, what he went through when he was a child, his past connections and relationships, a deeper dive into the cartel, this connection with Mecca and the whole betrayal in California, and also the fact that for those who may not have caught it in Power Season 1, Episode 1, Lobos does also have a sister.
Just saying, Lobos sets fire to people.
That guy was fucking his sister, man. We gotta give him his money. Cash.
So, in the rest of this breakdown, we are going to be running through all those points, as well as how Felipe Lobos prequel would bring a real freshness to the world of Power. So, as always, stick with this video right through to the very end, because I promise you, it's not going to disappoint. But let's start with how and why Felipe Lobos, to this very day, is still the very best villain the Power universe has ever seen.
Tú puedes tener tu propio cartel, ¿me entiendes? Sí. Te mudas al campo, te pasas los días pintando acuarela y deja que ellos tomen todo el riesgo.
Now, back in 2016, Enrique Murciano, who played Felipe Lobos, described his character as a man who loves the game but plays it with no rules. Corny Kemp also mentioned Lobos is the kind of villain who forces our heroes to confront their own morality. And Felipe Lobos was definitely a character who loved the game. He did play it like there were no rules. He was someone who came back to New York even though he knew he was on law enforcement's radar.
Our goal is the prosecution of one of the most notorious drug traffickers in our hemisphere, Mexican national Felipe Lobos.
Not a single care in the world, at least before he told Ghost he needed to go invisible and undetectable. But early on we saw how clever, strategic, and well connected he was. He knew Ghost and Tommy's organization was hit. He had eyes and ears everywhere from law enforcement to the streets. He wanted to see if his distributors in New York would be honest with him.
How are things?
Just fine. Something you need to know. We got hit last night.
So I heard.
Now, this was a test to see if Ghost and Tommy would tell him what was really going on with their organization. Even though Ghost made sure it didn't impact his pay schedule with Lobos, if they didn't deal with the threat, if it was internal to Ghost's organization, who knows how far it could have eventually gone up the food chain, and then eventually impact Felipe Lobos and his operation. I mean, you don't get to the position Felipe Lobos was in the cartel without making bold decisions, being strategic, being a strategic mastermind, and cutting people off when they need to be. That's who Felipe Lobos was.
I refuse to tolerate disloyalty in the men that work for me. The moment I detect disloyalty, I cut it out like a cancer.
Lobos had found out about Hannibal even before Ghost. He had connections all over the place, and he definitely was evil. While he was having this conversation with Ghost, we saw him torturing someone from law enforcement. He was someone who got enjoyment out of torturing. In that respect, he was very similar to Tommy Egan, because he was another character who got enjoyment out of torturing those who either betray him or were disloyal. But I do feel like the character that Felipe Lobos was even made Tommy Egan seem quite normal and quite uncomfortable. And to say that or even think that Tommy wasn't crazy as Felipe Lobos, now that's saying something about a character. For me, it was the mannerisms, the way he spoke, the way he'd get close and personal, the way he was so calm yet threatening at the same time. His evil stemmed mainly from his hunger for total control. Compared to Ghost, who wanted out of the drug game, Lobos was someone who thrived in the drug game, and he definitely did play the game well.
Kill Phantasma and become my soul distributor, or I will kill the both of you, and the girl, and the dog.
He was also someone who drove a huge wedge between the two brothers. He first tried to do it with Ghost when he told him that Tommy was holding him back, and then he exploited Tommy's desire to be at the very top of the food chain instead of Ghost. It was a psychological warfare. He wasn't afraid to threaten family, he wasn't afraid to tear the brothers apart, and he wasn't afraid to try and have the brothers kill each other. Now, long story short, because this breakdown isn't an analysis of Lobos' character, if that's something you guys want, then definitely let me know in the comment section. But long story short, as we know, it's very difficult to pull these two brothers apart. Ghost had the chance to go to Choate when he was younger, but he didn't. Why? Because he couldn't leave Tommy Egan behind. This brotherhood and bond they had was special, so it all led to this moment, breaking Felipe Lobos free from the transit of law enforcement and then killing him. But not before he left Ghost a message.
Phantasma, one day you will find yourself standing right here. God doesn't take men like us peacefully while we sleep.
Now, as we went through, Felipe Lobos was definitely a lot of things, but he was also the truth. He may have been driving a wedge between Ghost and Tommy, but he was also right. Tommy was holding Ghost back. He was right with a lot of things, including also how it would end for Ghost. A classic foreshadowing power. Now, with that being said, let's dive deeper into who Felipe Lobos was and the question whether we really knew the character. Now, we were introduced to Felipe Lobos in Season 1, Episode 1. We were introduced to him 6 months into his working partnership with Ghost and Tommy. We learned that he was a high-ranking Mexican cartel leader with operations across America, but the question around his origin story of how he got here, that's something a Lobos prequel would need to answer. How did he rise to power, his early life, or his cartel connections? You look at the story of raising Kanan and look at all the players that Kanan had a connection with. He wasn't this ruthless, manipulative character straight away. There's a backstory and a journey to him becoming the character we saw on Power. His mother Rock contributed towards it, Detective Howard did, in the sense of Kanan not having a father figure. His uncles were drug dealers. There was a relationship with Ronnie Mathis, which also connected him to Snaps and Pop. And look how much of a big influence they've been. They've also gone and introduced him to Breeze. So, bringing it back to Felipe Lobos, he wouldn't have always been this character we saw in Power with these mannerisms. He wouldn't have always been this cold. The question is, what happened in his past? How did he rise to power? Who did he lose? Who did he have to kill to get that power and claim the throne? We know how ruthless Mexican cartels are. How many wars did he fight with rival gang members? How many betrayals and snitches did he have to deal with? How many love interests did he have that impacted him on a personal level? Those are all of the types of questions and plot points that were never really addressed in Power. And that's what they can go really deep with when it comes to a backstory of Felipe Lobos. With that being said, there's also the untold story about Lobos' sister.
Just saying, Lobos sets fire to people.
That guy was fucking his sister, man.
Now in Power Season 1, Episode 1, Ghost and Tommy were outside Club Truth when Tommy mentioned Lobos sets fire to people. Ghost's response was, that person was sleeping with his sister. So there's another characteristic we didn't know or didn't see when it came to Felipe Lobos, a protective side. But on Felipe Lobos having a sister, that was the only mention in Power. It was short, sweet and brief. It was there to tell us, don't mess with Felipe Lobos, don't get on his bad side. However, we're talking about a potential idea for a Felipe Lobos prequel. Introducing Lobos' sister as a key character in a Lobos prequel would really tie it all together nicely with a little Easter egg from Power. But then the writers or the showrunner would have free reign with what they do with his sister. Is she involved with the cartel? Is she a businesswoman like Ghost back in Power? Maybe even involved with Lobos' operation, helping him clean his cash? Or did she have nothing to do with the game and the cartel? Whichever direction they were to take Lobos' sister in, they can take a story and add even more depth to Lobos' backstory. They can show his protective side and protective nature. They can even show us a scene where Lobos sets fire to the person who sleeps with his sister. There's a lot of different angles they could potentially take a story arc with Felipe Lobos' sister. And like I mentioned before, not everybody has to be in the game. She could be someone involved in something completely different. But you see a different side to Lobos when he's with his sister. This protective side, this caring side. In Power we saw the ruthless side. We saw the strategic chess player, a manipulator, a cartel leader. But these Mexicans are also very big on family and love. So they can then add that dimension to Lobos' character by introducing his sister, a grandmother, maybe more family members, nieces and nephews. But that's his family and the topic of his sister. Let's move on to the other operations, and specifically the California operation and Mecha's betrayal.
Betrayed. My operation in California has been irretrievably compromised.
Now, just before we get to Mecha's role and how he could play a huge part in this particular prequel, we have to remember, Felipe Lobos was the leader of a large drug empire that ran across America, not just New York.
I have men in Mexico that take care of the supply. I have a man in California, I have a man in Texas, and I have you here in New York. I want you to oversee them. I want them to report to you.
Lobos had the entire network and structure sorted from the supply in Mexico to distributors in America. He had Ghost and Tommy in New York, he had a man in Texas, and he also had a man in California. Whether it was just those states that Lobos had distributors in, or whether there was more, who knows. But Lobos' prequel can dive deeper into those areas in Texas and California, especially in California, because there was a certain character we were introduced to in Power Book 2 Ghost that had ties to Felipe Lobos.
I mean, we just had a good time in the spot.
Smell like a fucking nut.
Back in Season 2 of Ghost, we were introduced to Mecha. Kane called it straight off the bat when he said he smelled like a nog. And normally Kane's instincts do prove to be correct. He's got a pretty good track record of smelling bullshit. Davis McLean also mentioned he was one of the biggest informants on record, so well protected that law enforcement had sent him out of the country to protect him. Apparently he had a lot of famous hits, and one person that was on the list was Felipe Lobos.
See, I know a lot about you, man. I know about your uncle, Tommy. I know about your dad, Ghost. Shit. I even know what you did to that motherfucker.
Now, just to pause on Mecha's connection to Felipe Lobos just for a moment. He also told Tariq that he knew his uncle Tommy, he knew about Ghost, and he also knew what he did to Ghost. At the time, a lot of us questioned, how did Mecha know? How did he find out? I think the most logical answer was Blanca Rodriguez. He was her CI. Blanca Rodriguez was connected to a lot of what happened with the St. Patrick's, and that's how he possibly knew. However, he was a big part of Lobos' operation, which we're going to get to in just a moment. But because he was a big part of his operation, I think it only makes sense if you have a arc in Felipe Lobos' prequel that ties his story in with Mecha, and also answers this question of how Mecha really knew Tommy and Ghost, and also what Tariq did to Ghost. Did Mecha know more? Did Felipe Lobos ever have a conversation with Mecha about his famous distributors in New York? Could we also see everybody's Power fan favourite Blanca Rodriguez cross over? And could we see her have that conversation with Mecha to tie all these three shows together of Power, Power Book 2 Ghost, and the rise of Felipe Lobos? So, I do think it was worth a mention. Just like how they had Zion mention he knew Tommy and Ghost back in Season 4 of Ghost. Something I wish they went deeper on with in Season 4. I've said it countless of times before with Mecha. He was such a missed opportunity in the world of Power Book 2 Ghost. Honestly, it really would be great to see him pre-Ghost. And that brings me on to his role under Felipe Lobos.
Now, the highest bidder at that time was a man named Lobos. He took one look at me and he just knew I had a price. And he was right. You see, I sold him to the feds for my freedom, Tariq.
The operation that Lobos had in California was compromised, and we only learned about who was behind it 8 seasons of Power later. Mecha played a huge role in what happened in Power, because there was a huge domino effect. Mecha snitching on Lobos' operation in California meant that Lobos pushing twice as much product on Ghost and Tommy in New York. He moved most of his operation to New York towards the end of Season 1, which is where law enforcement set up their task force to bring down Felipe Lobos by targeting his New York distributors. Had Mecha not snitched, Cooper Sachs even told Tariq towards the end of Ghost Season 2, the story could have played out completely different. So, Mecha played a huge role, but a Lobos prequel? Now that could break down Mecha's actual role under Felipe Lobos. They can give us Lobos' entire operation when it was at its prime, maybe even in the same timeline when Ghost and Tommy are still alive running their operation in New York. So we could actually be watching the show at the same time as a Power timeline, but just from a different lens and a different perspective, in a different city with new players, Mecha being one of them. And then they can show us how Mecha snitched, how Mecha betrayed him, how he potentially linked back to Nomar and how he was snitching on her competition. Mecha's also a character that ties everything together, and this is what Corny Kemp had to say back in 2022. Mecha's backstory with Felipe Lobos ties the Power universe together, showing how past betrayals ripple forward. Now the thing is with this particular story, even though we know how past betrayals ripple forward, there's still so much story that they can give us in regards to this particular betrayal. And if they do ever go forward with the Lobos prequel, number one, I want to be a part of the writers team. I know at least one of the showrunners or someone from Starz is watching this, so that's number one. But number two, they just simply have to give us this backstory with Mecha. Because even though he was a snitch, even though he was the GOAT of global snitches, he was arguably the best villain of Power Book 2 Ghost. And this is a character whose story arc just simply has to be in this particular show. That's of course if they were to ever go forward with a Lobos prequel. You look at Power and it was mainly told through Ghost's perspective. A Lobos prequel would shift to the Mexican cartel's high stakes, international operations, which would offer more of a broader view and a global view of the drug empire, not the surface level that we normally see across Power shows. You've got Lobos' empire that stretches across multiple states, across multiple distributors, just like Mecha. You've got the Mecha story arc, the cartel angle, Lobos' sister, Felipe Lobos' backstory, his rise and how he became the character we saw in Power. And again, just like Corny Kemp mentioned in an interview back in 2020, the Power universe is about showing every single angle of the drug game, from the streets right to the very top. So what I would say in response is, a Felipe Lobos prequel could show the cartel world Power only hinted at. The rise of Felipe Lobos could be a whole new beast, changing the world of Power forever.